I think you'll find our next speaker draws a level of inspiration about how people organise, how they support each other in a very unique way, and you're going to love his talk. Mr. Philip Folsum, come on up.
Hi, girls. Thank you, brother. I don't need it. Just that one. That was very telling. Perfect. Pleasure to be here. I'm the other founder of the Sparta Project. So, Michael Salonius, give him a little hand. And I am actually one of the veterans that is part of that story. I'm a military veteran in the United States Army. One of the things that Michael didn't talk about is that we are coming from places of profound pre-trauma, which means most of us who chose to go into the military, it wasn't out of patriotism. It wasn't out of really anything behind the fact that it was our escape. It was the way to get out of neglect. It was a way to get out of poverty, which is the #1 driver of trauma. And so I was one of those kids that came out of that place, joined the military, and then when I re-entered the civilian world and I was dropped into that sick society that Michael talks about, then I was completely ungrounded. And in the military, they taught me how to operate within that honor code, which means what you think about me is important to the point that it actually eclipses what I think about me. And that is the answer to all the heroism that we experience in the military when they say, why did you throw yourself on that grenade? Or you ask a firefighter, why did you run into that building? And they all give the same exact answer, and that is, they would have done it for me. That's honor. Could I have all the military stand up real quick, just so I can get an eyes on you? So, if you have ever been immersed in a culture that is dictated by an honor code, you understand the power of that. You understand the actual robust rebar within the cement of your life that dictates your actions, makes you feel as if you belong. It gives you a profound sense of purpose, of meaning, and you understand exactly what life is about. And once you are yanked out of that system and dropped back into Krishnamurti's sick society, then it feels as if we're completely adrift. And all of a sudden we wake up and we wonder, why am I getting up? What's my purpose? What's my mission? What's the vision of my life that I can navigate off of when there's no North Star anymore? And I'm wandering in the dark through those dark woods. And at some point, that complete lack of meaning leads us down that spiral that so oftentimes leads to alcoholism, addiction, and suicide. So, a lot of different solutions. What my journey led me to dropping out of grad school. I'm an anthropologist now, and I also run a leadership development company, and I co-founded Sparta with Dr. Michael Salonius, one of my dear friends over the last 20 years. And what I discovered is that my journey of doing all sorts of questing through the psychotropics into adventure programs, doing equestrian therapy, and working with wolves gave me an information source that I realized that the majority of humans that I work with also desired. And this came not only from the trauma world, but also from the corporate world. People were looking for how do we get our teams to be more integrated, more collaborative, more communication skills and trust building skills. And if for those of you in the corporate world now, you're wondering, how do I fill the slots with the men and women who are honor-based and mission-oriented? Where are those hires that I can find? And my response to you is that they're killing themselves 22 a day. And if we can find a way to heal our veterans, what that will do is that will force down a huge amount of information into the rest of our world in the same way that if we can heal our wolves, then that will be a trophic cascade that will heal the rest of our society and our ecosystem. So the veterans kind of fulfill that role. That suicide epidemic, and it is an epidemic at this point, is not just relegated to our veterans. It also is very similar numbers to all of our first responders, our police, our fire. It also correlates to a lot of our inner city youth. They're also suffering from a very similar suicide rate. And when you look at that spike of suicide, even as low as middle school in our culture now, you realize there is something that is intrinsically damaged about our world. And I will repeat what Michael Salonius just said, that it is no measure of health to be well adapted to an extremely sick society. So what is that about? What's wrong with us? In my studies of anthropology over the years, when I look at those more what we call primitive tribes in Amazon basin, the Kalahari, Australia, what we're looking at is groups of people that are extremely well adapted to living in this natural world. And when you look at some of the scientific evidence, they have almost no diabetes, almost none. It almost doesn't exist. Similarly, they have very, very little heart disease. They have almost no cancer. They have very little back pain and knee pain. They have no clinical depression. They have no anxiety. And when we study the cortisol rates in their blood, they have radically less cortisol, which is a stress hormone in their blood, compared to our high-functioning advanced civilization. So when you look at our health and our well-being, there's something off right there. And so part of it is we're not designed for this. We're not designed for the world we're living in now. This is the sick society, and we've all become well adapted to it. We've learned how to behave in a world that no longer has honor, and we have replaced honor with pride. And pride is something that we have just explored, we've just invented, and it really is a thing that is only enforced through guilt and external means, which means as business owners now, we have to lean on external artificial ways of conducting behavior, which is your employee handbook. We need to look at artificial religions. We've created means of external enforcement because we no longer have the interpersonal accountability that is based in a tribal culture. And so one of those things that drives that is the fact that we are now no longer able to maintain the relationships with the people that we travel with, because now we're among strangers and we've had to adopt an impersonal system. And so they've shown that when a human being is next to a stranger, your amygdala, your hypothalamus is putting out a tremendous amount of stress hormones, because there's nothing scarier on the planet than the people who are sitting around you. When human beings have shown up in every single continent, we came to Australia 45,000 years ago. We killed off almost every single mammal on the whole continent. We did the same thing here in North America. About 12,000 years ago, we had mastodon running around right here. And when we showed up on the continent, huge mass extinction. Same thing with Europe. The only continent that managed to keep their megafauna is Africa, because Africa managed to evolve behaviorally with us as we assumed the ascension of this ferocious pack hunter that we are now. So they learned to avoid the two-leggers because they were the scariest things on the planet. So the people who are sitting around you, the strangers, we've learned to just accept that there's a stranger sitting behind you or next to you right now and go, okay, I'm just going to allow that to happen. But you can tell that to yourself in your prefrontal cortex and go, that makes sense to me intellectually, but it doesn't quiet the amygdala. It's going, there's a stranger standing right next to you. So right now, I'd like you to please introduce yourself to one of the strangers who's sitting in one of the seats adjacent to you. Formal introduction, first, middle, and last name. Make some friends.
Not a stranger.
Okay, guys, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm glad that I had to ask you to be quiet, because it really shows that there was a tremendous need to connect. It's like, oh, thank God, I finally get to be a human. Instead of sitting here politely, well adapted to the sick society. The reality is that we are creatures that have emotions, and we do cry, and we do rage. We do have all of these things that are intensely part of us. My guess is that most of you got a right handshake, yes? It's true in every culture. And so when we study all those different cultures across the globe, they all have some way of designating no weapons with their right hand. And so in desert communities, we throw sand in the air. I'm Choctaw, which is a Native American. So when we've all seen the Indian movies where the chief raises his right hand, right? The handshake is really a demonstration of not only do I want to check your hand to make sure you've got nothing, but I'm demonstrating I have none either. And when people are demonstrating no weapons with their right, but they're actually holding one in their left, it means they're sinister, which is Latin for left-handed. In the military, when we salute, and in every culture, there's some sort of a right-handed salute towards your face. And what that is it's an homage to the raising of the visor that the knights have that reveals your most vulnerable aspects of your body, saying, listen, I'm not going to hurt you, and I expect the same treatment back. When we clink our glasses together, and I saw this last night in the wild rumpus at the at the party last night, I saw people clinking their glasses. That's a ritual that came from the medieval courts when we used to poison each other at such a level that you would slosh wine back and forth because you wanted to make sure that the host was drinking some of what you were drinking. So when you look at all these rituals that are about greeting other people, they're all about safety. So what does that tell you about the nature of the Sikh society? And it really is a profound impact. So I brought in our veterans once to a wolf rescue center, because this was one of the modalities that made sense to me. Here I am, I'm a perceived, potentially violent person. I was trained with weapons, and now I'm introduced into society, and you think certain things about me. You also may see certain things about these animals and go, they're misunderstood as well. In the whole history of the United States, there has been only 2 attacks on humans by wolves in the history of the United States. And yet, this is a creature that we have vilified and we have attempted to exterminate on every continent throughout the history of mankind. And when I first showed up to bring the veterans to the wolves and conduct some healing after our meditation and to conduct that process, the first thing that I witnessed was a very robust altercation between 2 wolves. And it sounded horrific and it looked horrific. And then I asked one of my dear friends, Mr. Steve Wastel, I said, Steve, aren't you going to break that up? And he said, no, man, that's just what they do. And we all know that when you see dogs in an altercation, we want to quickly get those things apart because there's going to be fur and blood flying. And the reality is that we have created dogs. These were our dogs 100,000 years ago. And they have come with all the baggage and all the psychological sick society that we have carried within us. So when dogs fight, they bite. When humans fight, we bite as well. Except nowadays, it's not so much poison wine and weapons. It's about gossip. It's about undermining. It's about withholding of best practices and information. There's a lot of politicking that goes on. And so we bite each other. And wolves do not. And this is one of the big lessons that Steve and Paula taught me. They said, yeah, they never bite each other. And I said, with these huge dentition, and you'll get a chance to see them later on today, they've got much bigger teeth, the better to kiss you with, my darling. And they have much bigger brains than our dogs do. And he said, no, they don't bite each other because they're pack animals. They're pack hunters. And what wolves do to survive is that they kill animals 10 times their size with their face. They can't do it alone. So they are hardwired for collaborative behavior. And so because of that, if they bite each other, it's like biting themselves. And so they have learned how not to do that. So the wolves are able, because they don't bite each other, to discharge the trauma that Michael was talking about and not force it down and not have it pop up otherwhere in some weird toxic way of have to beat my kids. So they immediately get to exercise that trauma in a very healthy way, and then they run off and play together because they have given each other a chance to share authentically what their truth is. And what that does, it creates a feedback loop of accountability that creates healthy behavior and really high-performing behavior. And if what I just mentioned to you is in any way sounds familiar to the coaching you received in your sports team when you were young, or if you were in the military, what you were taught in the SEALs, or in any of the other high-performing human tribes that we have, that is tribal awareness. And there are many thinkers right now that are looking at the past of humanity, and they're thinking, well, we were obviously scavengers for a long period of time. So we were really good at long-distance running, so we could spend 2 days running down an antelope, or we could wait till all the rest of the animals got what they wanted. And at that point, we would come in, maybe be able to break a bone and get some marrow, and that's how we survived for a long time. And they can look at the fossils in Africa and they can go, oh, big cats, they're the ones that made the kill. Here we have the hyenas, tooth marks on top, vulture peck marks, and then we got the little longitudinal scratch marks, which are our feeble little butchery attempts. And so we were the bottom of the totem pole. We were the ones that were getting what was either opportunistic or last. We were scavengers. Until that magical moment happened where all of a sudden, when they're looking at the bones, we see, oh, all of a sudden we have humans making the kills. We have humans with the controlled use of fire. We have humans who are looking at a very different cultural experience based on their burial rites. And that was the moment when we started domesticating these guys. And what Steve and Paula have shared with me is that it maybe was not us that domesticated the wolf. Maybe it was the other way around. Maybe they domesticated us. And when you look at, obviously, our biology and our morphology, we have a vastly amount of our, 98% of our DNA, like the chimpanzee, we're very similar to that. But behaviorally, we're very, very close to wolves. So this is the way that we're supposed to operate, in a way that is collaborative, that is safe, and that's the way that we can reclaim our birthright, is by looking at what is the way that we can do that makes things more successful. So wolves are very shy. They're very skittish. And so if we can just give them a little snap, just as a welcome. And Steve and Paula are people who have shared their entire life to be able to rescue these animals. And you guys aren't mic'd right now, so I'll just speak for you. They've rescued over 60 of these animals in the last several years. And the wolf is the apex predator in the world until our ascension. And so the reason why we have attempted to exterminate them, and why there's so much mythology about the big bad wolf, about the werewolf, about that creature that lives in the night and kills Little Red Riding Hood, is that it is a false mythology about our threat of something that is equally powerful as us. And so the wolves are that apex predator that is on its way out in the entire world right now. So this is one that we could be seeing the last several generations of this animal. And these are people in the front line who are attempting to go about and fix that. My connection with them is that if we can save the wolves, and many of you have probably seen the short little film about the wolves reintroduced to Yellowstone. They literally changed the entire ecosystem, and then they changed the geology or the geography of the park. So it's incredibly powerful what fixing an ecosystem will do. Veterans are a very similar dynamic, because if we can figure out how to unpack and discharge that amount of trauma, if we can learn to be able to adopt some mindful lifestyles and behaviors, and if we can learn how to rebuild our tribe, then we're going to be able to have an incredible way to be able to push down to the rest of our society, not only our veterans, but we can save the next generation of kids who are also struggling. So it's been a real pleasure, you guys, being with you guys.